And in September in 2016, we opened our very first Holey Moley, built a new brand in 6 months. It absolutely flew. Social media had taken off. And so the shareability of such a visually shareable environment just went crazy. Like people in Melbourne were like, when do we get one? When you have the DNA of innovation, what happens is as you're rolling, you're innovating at the same time. So we were just getting better and better. It was guerrilla, it was disruptive. I remember doing sumo wrestling in the bar with the big sumo suits and handing out sake shots on Wednesdays. But you definitely saw this pent-up need and desire to play.
To what extent do you now think the CEO's job is to be focused on big picture and strategy? And to what extent is it to still be the person who cares most about the tiny details?
Yeah, it's a really good point. If you can truly make every single guest genuinely, authentically feel counted, that's a movement.
StoryWork is brought to you in partnership with Slingshot. Slingshot are Australia's creative media experts, and having worked successfully with them for years, I'm thrilled to have them on board.
You're listening to a DM podcast.
Well, hi friends, my name is Matt Jones. Welcome to another episode of StoryWork, episode 6. If you're new here, you've missed a lot. If you've been here before, welcome back. Now, today's guest, on face value, has a somewhat unlikely CV for a CEO. But then you listen to what Blaise Witnish has to say, the story she tells about the things she's done and the way she's done them, and it all makes sense. Blaise took 13 years to finish her university degree, but then her corporate trajectory just went at warp speed. She went from being the marketing manager of a bowling bar to running a company with more than 80 venues across 3 countries and counting. She's the CEO of Funlab. She oversees some of the most iconic brands in entertainment in Australia: Strike, Archie Brothers, Hijinx Hotel, La-Di-Da's. She's overseen the expansion of Holey Moley now into the USA. And what Blaise understands is this balancing act. On the one hand, she's running a business that's built on entertainment, on service, on hospitality, on creativity, on fun, on the stories that people are allowed to enter into, the stories that people tell about the experiences they have there. But on the other hand, she's running a business with some really hard economic and operational challenges. Let's talk to Blaise and understand how she balances those and the story she tells herself about what business Funlab is really in. Blaise Witnish, welcome to StoryWork. Thanks for coming here.
Thanks, Matt. I'm very excited about being here.
Yeah, well, that's good. Excitement is good. It's positive. I think you and I are of quite a similar sort of professional vintage. Like your first job was a party host in 98. My first job was proper job after uni was 97. And I remember as I sort of grew up in the brand experience industry, there are a number of people trying to write about this notion of the experience economy and experience design. It felt like quite a new frontier and a new discipline. And I remember someone once writing that effectively it was a faith-based discipline, that you either had faith in the notion of individual experiences accumulating into a movement, or you didn't. You either built a Ritz-Carlton-y kind of culture where you went, every guest experience matters, and if we do it right enough, often enough, it will build into a global brand, or you just don't really believe in it. But you can't measure the impact. If you're that restaurant designing that and going, well, maybe we could save on that front of house person. It doesn't matter that Blaise doesn't feel that way when she shows up for the date night. It's very hard to measure what you've lost or what you gain when you have it. You either have faith that that's an important part of your brand or you don't.
No, and it's hard to measure. And I was telling you, we were talking about the book Power of Moments, which is our new favourite book. We're actually getting every single general manager, venue manager globally to read it. And, there's a great start of the book. It talks about this hotel, and I can't believe I can't remember the name of it, in Santa Monica. And it ranks number 3 or 4 on TripAdvisor. And you're talking like the very best brand of hotels are in Santa Monica. And this rates 3 or 4. And the reason being is they've built these unbelievable moments, one of which, it's a pretty basic hotel. It's bright pink. It hasn't got an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It's got an outdoor swimming pool. But it has this bright blue phone that if you walk up and pick it up, you can order any type of icing pole you want, and it actually arrives in a galoche by the team member, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. Or if you have a whole heap of dirty clothes, you can get them laundered any time. They come beautifully wrapped in, brown paper and a little tiny sprig of lavender on the top, all complimentary. And there's these moments in a pretty basic hotel. Like, there's nothing special about the room. I think, how do you can measure that on TripAdvisor, which is brilliant, but how do you truly measure those moments that people leave with and start to talk about? And I think if you have that true belief that creating those types of experiences and those moments that people can remember, you can build a global business because word of mouth is just so powerful.
Your journey as a leader effectively maps against the Funlab journey, right? Like, you have literally grown up professionally in that business. Give me a sense of how your role was growing as the business was growing.
Literally grew up in it to that point and grew as a leader throughout it. So, when I first started, I had finished a marketing degree at Vic Uni in Footscray. I, started my career as a party host, and then I ended up doing function coordinating. I actually started, the phone used to ring, and I used to have to pick up the phone and then quickly worked out how to do function coordinating. And the difference back then was you would book the corporate event and then you'd actually run it operationally. So I grew up in it, meaning that I wore many hats, sort of like a founder, from running the reception to running to bar to running functions, doing the marketing, guerrilla marketing, wearing the Penny mascot if I had to. And so I really did kind of grow up in in sort of a founder startup sort of mentality, wearing lots of different hats. And by the time we sort of had 6 or 7 venues, I'd really sort of cemented more of my role as the marketing manager at that point, sort of launching the businesses and getting them sustainable, and then, putting on promo nights, etc. And then I moved to London for 3 years, and sliding doors moment, run into the founder, Michael Schreiber.
So you moved to London, but you've also left the business for a while.
I've left the business, yeah. So 3 years, and ended up launching casinos over in the UK in London. Built a brand called Aaliyah. The Empire at Leicester Square, some people will know, we launched that brand. And had an absolute ball, and ran into the founder, Michael Schreiber, in a laneway in Mayfair randomly. And he was like, long story short, I ended up coming home, and that was the sort of the end of it. But my role kept emerging from, then taking on the head of sales and marketing and growing the business to the next point, and then eventually into, head of operations or the COO role, and was there for a long time, really throughout, I guess, building the brands or the multiple brand play up until, literally 6 months ago.
So let's, I think, go back to the beginning. And before there was a business called Funlab, there was a bowling alley business. So I'm interested in the founder, Michael Schreiber, and what did he see, I think, originally in the fact that there was a lot of sort of unused or underused space in retail and shopping center environments that maybe could be filled. So maybe start us at the beginning of where this Funlab journey starts, in the bowling alley.
Yeah, so it's 2001. And Michael Schreiber actually owned an amazing man, by the way, very humble. He's a real visionary, particularly in entertainment. I think he's actually the most underestimated, globally unrenowned person in entertainment. I can genuinely say that, and probably because he is so humble. But in 2001, he started Strike Bowling Bar, as we called it back then, because we needed the bowling bar for anyone to understand what it was. And today it's Strike. What he saw were two things. One, he previously owned Kingpin, which is a long story and probably need a bottle of wine, in his previous company. But he saw one thing when he opened Kingpin, which was this 100-year-old love affair with getting a ball from the Freddie Flintstone days and bowling it down and knocking down pins was this, I guess, a very sustainable business. Like, people genuinely loved it, even though it was quite archaic when you look at the history of it. And there's two things. One, he saw that the league bowling was dying, and that's really where bowling was at the time. But there was this sort of brewing, and he was a futurist, if you can, he's a futurist in every sense of the word. And he could start to see this kind of younger social want and desire to bowl. And he took a very uncool, I guess, concept in bowling and built sort of an adult playground with bowling. And then, we had private bowling lanes and the lighting, and there was DJs, and then we built karaoke, and you could have an amazing cocktail and bowl at the same time. I mean, how outrageous. League bowlers all around Australia were fuming. Some of them tried to come and bowl at our venue and weren't happy with the amount of oil we had and the fact that, there was tequila shots being had on the next lane next to them. And, he really did. He saw that there was this need, this want and desire for, I guess, social play, social fun, which today is now called competitive socialising. And the other part to that, as you previously mentioned, was, retail, and even today, even more so, is, we see a huge demand for entertainment to fill the void of retail, with obviously omni-channel and online taking off. But back then was starting to be a lot of unused space. And, our first one was in the basement, which was an old shoe shop that had gone bust. And we took this basement level and built Strike on Chapel way back when.
How important was it to him in the early days that he make bowling, I was going to say cool again, but I'm not sure if bowling was ever before that time cool. Like, one of my favorite films was The Big Lebowski, that sort of league bowling tradition. But I don't know if bowling was really cool. But how important was it to him that he target adults and he target cool and he give it this kind of cultural energy? I remember, you kind of gave me a copy of the Funlab sort of history book and reading about some of the early campaigns and sort of trying to attract corporate events with lines like, nothing HR can't sort out in the morning, or find your inner child and feed it booze, stuff that probably walk the wrong side of responsible alcohol advertising lines.
Well,
but
we had to rip them off. I mean,
but there was a sense of edge, right? And energy. How important and conscious was that at the beginning?
I think really conscious. I think the one thing we've always held true is if we can position the brands at that kind of 22-year-old, we all know I've got a 9-year-old, they want to be 18. I'm 45. I'd like to be 18 again. And so if you can get that right, you'll actually appeal to all. But we knew we definitely had to really test it. And so, Dom Dollar, who's playing, in packed out arenas, he was actually a DJ at Strike on Chapel way back when. Like, no one had ever seen a DJ play at a bowling alley. The lighting was so dark, you could barely see the bowling ball. And so it was really about disrupting. It was disrupting that entire thought process of what is bowling. I mean, we brought in Velcro shoes and nobody had ever seen a Velcro bowling shoe ever. And so it was, and then we started designing the bowling shoes in different colours and just really disrupting and changing the game. I think from very, very early on, it was about how far could we take it.
What I found fascinating at this point in the chat is you can already see the Funlab creative DNA, the organizational DNA taking shape. As Blaise says there, they were trying to push things, but of course, at this stage, they're pushing things within a constraint, the natural constraint that they're working with bowling alleys. We all know how bowling alleys operate. Where things get really interesting are when they start to develop their own original concept, as we'll hear. The other bit of DNA that I find fascinating is this commitment to entertaining adults. It strikes me that the relatively low bar that they could have chosen to jump over would have been creating fun spaces for kids, but they didn't limit themselves to that. They tried to always design fun in adult ways. Let's hear what that looked like. So you're building this adult social playground. You're targeting this cool 22-year-old to come and socialize and compete with friends and have fun. But you're doing it for a time before everything was being captured on an iPhone and everything was getting posted to social. So what even then were the Funlab, were the Strike team and Michael seeing, do you think, in terms of the shift of culture towards shared experience?
Well, first of all, we were just seeing people come in groups. I think that's the first thing. You're seeing groups of 4 or 5 and not for an event, or even up to 10 of their mates coming in. So you're seeing this want and desire to compete but not seriously. And it was about joy and laughter and the interaction and then, the dwell time of drinking on and then doing karaoke. So we definitely saw that. And I think – now it's hilarious because of, online dating. I mean, where could you do kind of date nights outside of restaurants. And so date nights for us were enormous. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you'd see people coming in, to a bowling alley for a date night, and particularly a cool one. You wouldn't normally go to a league bowling kind of boring alley to do it. So if you think of it like that, what a great fun social thing to do on first dates or third dates or whatever that looked like. So you were starting to see a lot more of that early doors. But we were like, the way we'd go to market, and you talk about back then, right? You don't have social media, and we had no budget. Like we had one or two. We kind of opened up one bowling alley a year, privately owned, really slow growth. And so you can imagine the marketing budgets were, minuscule. And so we would do ridiculous things. We had a bowling pin and a bowling ball mascot built where we would do these ridiculous either dance routines, or we would have the bowling pin or ball chase each other on literally the train platforms in the CBD to drive corporate flyer handouts. And we bought an XD or XB Ford and cut the roof off and had strike flames coming down the side, and then we'd hand out free bowling passes at the beach. It was guerrilla. It was disruptive. I remember doing sumo wrestling in the bar with the big sumo suits and handing out sake shots on Wednesdays. We had probably one of the biggest hospo nights called Cuervo Shootout, where we go to all the local bars up and down Chapel Street in the city at Strike QV in Melbourne, and they'd all shoot off against each other and play off, and we had leaderboards and do tequila shots, and it was disruptive and it was fun, but you definitely saw this pent-up need and desire to play and to have fun that wasn't at a bar or a nightclub. It was drinking and playing whilst you're sort of competing, but anyone could do it. And when you think about it, you just get a ball and you bowl it down. Anyone can do it. And now we have bumpers, of course, which make it even easier. And so it's not a skill you need to have. Anyone can do it. So you're removing those barriers too. Super fun.
We met up at I think we're going to call it like Alexandria precinct of fun. Like it is the Funlab center of gravity. Like pretty much I think every brand you guys currently operate is all there in that precinct.
That's the epicenter.
And I was waiting outside Hotel Hijinx, and there's like little Holey Moley golf buggies out there, and one of them on the number plate, it's just like Holey Moley, like golf, but fun.
Yes.
And just the thing that you notice, even spending 5 minutes not being a consumer there, but just observing, is the attention to detail. It's the small stuff. It's the fact that the Hotel Hijinx concierge sign is on an angle, like a sort of creaky old hotel. Like there's just this sense of sweating the small stuff, caring about the details. And I'm interested, you've grown up in that business and now you're the CEO of that business. To what extent do you now think the CEO's job is to be focused on big picture and strategy? And to what extent is it to still be the person who cares most about the tiny details?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think it's a balance. And obviously taking on the new role, we were talking earlier about strategy the next 3 to 5 years. But I think, someone who grew up and started as a party host, like literally a kid's party host in 1998, and has grown up in the business, what is a business like ours, which is in real life experiences, you can't be the CEO if you're not close enough to it. And so, today I'm in Sydney, tomorrow Sydney, and I'll go to every single venue. I'll tour the venue with the venue manager, and I'll spend as much time as I can with our team, which are called Mother Funners. And I do that because, not to tick a CEO box and look at me, but I think it's that genuine want and desire to make sure that it's the detail and the retail, and both in the physical sense of the venues, but also making sure our team is supported, they're happy, and the culture is right.
I love you said that it's both. I feel an argument I often have is about this notion of bothism. I think of it as like when you've got little kids, and they often, one of the things they say often is like, but you said, and you're like, yeah, but two things can be true at the same time. Like, and I feel that's often the case in leadership, that both Seth Godin wrote about this, that nothing matters, but everything matters to someone. And so if as a CEO, you're like worrying too much about every detail, you have to remember there's a bigger momentum and trajectory to the business. But at the same time, every moment mattered to someone, and you don't get to control which of those moments really mattered to that someone.
No, it's funny you saying about everything matters to someone. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but probably having some time. I just spent 6 months in LA launching our first double branded precinct or mini precinct in Irvine in LA. I had time. I got appointed as a CEO in November, and I had time to really think about how I wanted to show up as a CEO, but also something I thought was lacking in our business. And we have a genuine great culture and we love looking after guests. But when I step back, if you can truly make every single guest genuinely, authentically feel counted, that's a movement. And I got inspired by Ted Lasso's show of Believe, if anyone's ever seen it, on Top of the Door. That's a great series anyway on leadership. There's lots of great messages in it. And I felt like we had a great purpose in our business, but we didn't have a calling card, a mantra that every single person in the business could get around and kind of almost as a reminder of why we even exist. And yeah, if we can get every single guest to feel like they count, so every guest counts is our mantra. Yeah, you want to feel counted.
So talk about then, I guess, the growing up of Strike. And it feels like there's a sliding doors sort of moment where the Strike sort of template for adult play and socializing could have got formalized and scaled, and you bring in some private equity and you sort of, open 5 times as many venues and there's a Strike on every corner. But instead of just doing that, you go into the world of Sky Zone, which is a very, very different form of play and sort of bringing energy and excitement to socializing. It feels, reading the book, like a really important chapter, because now instead of you guys getting to build your own culture, Funlab gets involved in licensing someone else's brand. So I'm really interested in your reflections then on why you made the leap into Sky Zone and what that taught the business about the boundaries of building within, if you like, someone else's playbook.
Yeah, super interesting. I think, just to go back to give it some context, we were always innovating. Like the word adapting, innovation, culture, those words now that are like, everyone just kind of riffs them off. He was a visionary. We were doing that in 2002. May not been on a scale, but we were constantly finding ways. As a business, we have this DNA of this. It's almost like an itch we just can never scratch enough of, which is we're just constantly trying to be the best or to find a new way of doing it that can be better. And that was way back then. And so even with Strike in terms of innovation, we had added at that point with Sky Zone, we had gone and built escape rooms, which were red hot out of Europe, cut a deal with a couple of young guys that had built the kind of written form of what an escape room was, and we turned one of our businesses around and added escape rooms. So karaoke, laser tag, we were always on that edge. We never built a new brand though, to your point.
Maybe that was the better question. Maybe the better question was why, instead of the innovation always happening within Strike and adding more elements, why did the business then decide to step outside and build or originate another brand and effectively another category of socializing?
100%. So we saw Bounce, which is still, the number one trampoline park business in Australia, and credit to them. They've got an amazing culture, and the founders are exceptional. Know all of them. We saw a lineup in Glen Iris in Melbourne of 3,000 kids trying to get into this trampoline park, and we all went, "What is this thing?" And trampolines and building them are very difficult. So when we did the research, Sky Zone is the actual founder of trampoline parks in the USA. They didn't have any in Australia, and so we got the master franchise agreement from them. And then we all went over to the US and studied it. And it was our first location was actually Alexandria in Sydney. And look, I'll be really honest, their culture was different to ours, but the fundamental want and desire to look after people, guests, the processes were within our realm, and it was a business that we could implement. The exciting news of it, I think week 1, we did $320,000 in the first week. I think I pre-sold $250,000 in kids' parties. And the most kids' parties in Sky Zone Alexandria, just to give you stats, I think it was 96 kids' parties in a weekend. It was an absolute success. The step change for us though was we knew we had the ability to do multiple brands at that point because Strike, like for like, never changed. It only grew. And so there's this inner belief and know-how that we can run more than one brand. We have the ability to adapt. We can take on a master franchise. We can adopt it and then build our own manuals and create our own way of doing it. We were their number one trampoline park commercially for a very long time globally, which is pretty extraordinary. And I think that just gives you confidence and the ability to think bigger on a bigger scale of what this business could be.
With that confidence, did it also give you any lessons or conviction that while the Sky Zone sort of experiment had been a success, the limitations of working within someone else's model were not something you wanted to keep doing?
Yeah, I remember the first day we were trying to open Sky Zone, and really still a very good friend of mine now, Glenn Law, the COO of Sky Zone, came over, and they have to like green light you that this is fit for purpose. This is Sky Zone, tick of approval, you can open the doors. And he said, you're not ready. And we had a history of like, I could be painting the walls and we opened Strikes. Like, you know, somebody would be like pretending to be the Sparky just to get the doors open. And we were like, what do you mean? We're ready to go. And they're like, you're 3 days away. And so I felt like as much as we loved it, we were limited. What they did in credit to them was flex. So even then they flexed and said, look, get it to this point, we'll let you open. But also from a brand perspective, we reshot all of our brand elements. The colour was, if you've ever been to the USA, it's orange and only orange. I mean, they wear, you know, literally only bright orange. And so they let us really lead some of the brand changes and actually took a lot of our marketing promotions and know-how back globally. So we were probably lucky that we had capability and they kind of saw it. And because we were so far away, they let us play. So we got to play.
Now you're back playing by your rules. How did you sort of police yourself to go, well, this is good enough and the stuff that is going to drive the fun and be Instagrammable, that's already, some stuff is still rough around the edges, but that's okay, push the button, let's go. Does that come from instinct? Does that come from a sense of a formal idea about the standards you're trying to reach? I'm fascinated by that.
I think there's two things. I think usually your pre-bookings will tell you everything. So we'll set a goal for pre-bookings and we know if we hit that goal, we're in good shape. And anything above that, that'll tell you that this will be red hot. We pre-booked, I can't even remember the number, into Fortitude Valley. It was a pretty small venue. I think it was like $70,000. No one had a clue what like a mini golf bar even looked like in this country at that time. And so we kind of went, okay, these guys don't even know what this is. We had an amazing Kath Rose who did our PR and absolutely nailed it at the time. But you know, when you've paid off a venue in 3 months, it's usually a good sign that you need to get your skates on it and get moving. So it's an intuitive, it's an instinct, but you have commercial milestones, and if they're reached or superseded, you know you're onto something.
See, what I'm hearing there a little bit is never underestimate the value of momentum, because someone else could have answered that question and gone, all these pre-bookings, all that hype, we had to make sure that we didn't disappoint people and we didn't miss their expectations. And I'm sure you have very strict standards around hospitality and creativity, but what I'm hearing there as well is the importance of momentum, of kind of capturing that cultural wave and riding it while it's there for you.
Definitely, but I think at the same time it's that when you have the DNA of innovation, what happens is as you're rolling, you're innovating at the same time. So we were just getting better and better, you know, in terms of the uniforms. And, you know, we found Loudmouth, the perfect bottoms for skirts and skirts and shorts and whatever. And we're like, great, that's going to be like you as you're rolling, you're finding better, smarter ways. I think if, you know, for us, if we kind of sat and just kept rolling with what we had, I think to your point, that's where it becomes a problem. But it's a business where it's constantly trying to find the better, the best, something new, something that's more edgy or can get us to a better place. You know, and I talk about the innovation, the DNA. We actually have a concept called FFS, for fun's sake, that we hold every year, where every single person in the business has an opportunity to pitch an idea. It could be any idea, but it has to be a new concept. It could be to make money, to save money, or it could be for a better way for our team in terms of culture. And you do a video for 2 minutes and you put it through the system, and usually the top three actually get executed. And actually Hijinx Hotel came from an FFS idea. And so I think that gives you that, I guess, the sense of the commitment we have to innovation. So yeah, we had momentum. We knew we were onto something, and we rolled it, but we never rolled them out the same. They were always better and better as we went.
It feels to me, looking from a distance, and I also feel like I've patronized every Funlab venue, but maybe Holey Moley more than any other. From looking from a distance, it feels like Holey Moley is kind of when Funlab really becomes Funlab. What was the starting point of that journey? What did you see as a business in the Holey Moley concept that made you move so fast? And how did you then move so fast to execute?
It's probably one of my favorite stories because, we sign up like so many people in different categories to, newsletters and, entertainment, people that were writing reports or whatever that was. And Michael, the founder, said, look, there's been this sort of write-up on a thing called Junkyard Golf in Manchester in UK, and I kind of went online and looked at it. It looks brilliant. Does anyone know it? We sat around the exec team and went, no one had a clue. And I actually had my sister-in-law, Amy, in No Word of a Lie in Manchester at the time. I said, let me just get her to go and check it out. And she rang me and she said, I've tried to book online. I can't get in for 2 weeks. And I was like, just go and have a drink there. Anyway, she went and took photos and videos and all those things. And what we realized was there's this kind of mini golf crazy 18-hole experience that they'd literally, like a junkyard, knocked it together and created this crazy space with crazy drinks that you could not get into for weeks at a time. And so we decided that was going to be our next move. We were going to open mini golf bars and take people knew what was mini golf and turn it on its head and create it into an adult paradise. And we saw the concept in March, and in 6 months we'd built Holey Moley. And that's everything from hole designs. We now have 289 unique Holey Moley holes that we've built over the years. But yeah, 6 months of uniforms, team manuals, you name it, beverage, food, everything. We found our location, which was an old church in Fortitude Valley in Brisbane. And in September in 2016, we opened our very first Holey Moley. And that was a step change for us in an enormous way. It was cheap and cheerful. We took an old sort of bar and as I said, built a new brand in 6 months. It absolutely flew. Social media had taken off. Things like Facebook and Instagram and those things had started. And so the shareability of such a visually unbelievable, shareable environment just went crazy. Like people in Melbourne were like, when do we get one? And so the reason why we rolled it out so quickly in all the major cities was we took old nightclubs and bars. So our property strategy was like move with speed, populate every single major city. But for speed, we need to have infrastructure in place. So we literally found in every city in a great location, mainly downtown or in the CBD, an old bar or nightclub and went to work. In 18 months, we were in every major city in Australia. And the brand just absolutely took off from there.
Just while we're on Holey Moley, I'm fascinated. Was this the point where, as a business, you started to realize that you weren't just running venues, you were building entertainment IP? Like, clearly that is something that the Funlab business has done, and you've now got some extraordinary IP. Were you conscious of it back then, or was that still an emerging thought?
I think that was an emerging thought, to be really honest. I don't think that was the strategy. I think, again, we kind of went, okay, we can do multiple brands. And now it was like, okay, we can actually build IP. And then when we started to have, in our arsenal, 70, 80, 90 individually designed mini golf holes that were curated to space, weren't even like modular. We were like, okay, we've built something here that's, has a moat. This is hard to replicate. We at that point, we'd probably done 8 or 9 up to 10 venues, and we had some serious IP that we were like, okay, this is exciting.
One of the things that strikes me that it gives you is the ability to talk with the authenticity that comes from lived experience when you're talking to people about the importance of human behavior within the Funlab experience. Because at the end of the day, you can do all the creative work you want, you can come up with the great concepts and the great IP and build these immersive experiences and grab ideas from the other side of the world that haven't happened in Australia and bring them all to life. But if your people don't then show up and bring all of their selves and their energy and their enthusiasm and their love, then the experience will to some extent fall flat. And you've got almost a unique right to drive people to deliver because you have for such a long time been the person delivering. I think that's really differentiating for your role.
Massively. I think there's, you can stand up in front of whether it's a support office with everyone there, 100 people, or, today, like this afternoon, I'll be with a management team of 10 from Alexandria. And, I'm asking simple questions, which is like, what's not working? And it's from a place of not a corporate office scenario. I'm genuine. I want to know, where are we getting it right? Where are we getting it wrong? And then how do I help? Is there some common threads that we're not nailing, and how do I bring it back to the team and fix it? It's pretty simple, but yes, I get to do it, and it's probably just more around the authenticity and from a place of understanding, truly understanding, because I've probably played a lot of those roles with the people that are sitting in front of me.
But then, as you say, like anyone who becomes CEO, you've got the stuff that got you there, and now you've got the stuff you also have to do. And for you, that's about that sense of elevation to that strategic place. You've talked about being, and when we've spoken previously, about Funlab being a house of brands, not just a company that has multiple venues. What in your mind is the difference? What are you trying to build? When you think of the whole of Funlab as it is today, how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think the beauty of a house of brands, and often people just say, I don't understand why you don't just put Funlab in a box and then put all the brands within it. I think when you look at our business and you look at our brands and concepts, they're all anchored by an activity, but they all are so different from the moment you walk in to what you feel, what you get immersed in, right from start to end. And I think the beauty in that is, and let's talk commercially, is that you're seeing a visit at one brand as an individual visit. And so you could go to Alexandria and go 4 times in 8 weeks and have a completely different experience every time you're there. And it reads that way as a guest. And so repeatability and creating habitual behavior around going to somewhere like Alexandria exists. Like, we'll go to Alexandria, there's always something fun to do.
There's something I read that you have this policy of first who when you're hiring people. So talk a bit about how you make sure you have the right people for Funlab, but also the right people for those individual brands and experiences and feelings.
Yeah, I love that. We're all really angry that have been in the business for 23 years because someone in our business, Wayne Robson, only a few years ago came up with an idea and said, I'm going to make every single person wear costume that comes for the interview. Genius. What he was doing was saying, hey, if you want to work for us, you got to get a little bit silly. And so we even had our latest CFO who's joining us had to wear costume to the interview. And every single person on the exec has to wear costume. So it's a two-way street. But what it does is it kind of self-selects to start with. It's actually brilliant when you think about it. So that's the first thing. So you have to wear costume. The best example for me is I did the actual recruitment days for Irvine because it was such a big precinct. It was really important. I was in LA and I was like to the team, hey, I'll dress in costume too. Let's do it together. We had 300-400 people come and do the interviews in full costume in this shopping centre. You can imagine like what that looks like. And we were launching the 2 brands though, Holey Moley and Hijinx. It happened to be those 2. And what I was briefing to the team is you're looking at 2 very different characters. Hijinx is very much about playing a character. So there's a receptionist, there's a bartender of a hotel, and then when you go in and experience Hijinx in the challenge rooms, we actually have the team there in uniform because they're actually hotel cleaners. But they need to brief in a crazy way. And so you're looking for more extroverted type characters. And so we really went into the types of characteristics you're looking for those venues, for those particular brands. So when we were earmarking, we're kind of asking you very specific questions to unearth the characteristics. I said to one person in my team, when the person sits down, in the waiting area to do their interview, walk up to them with a $10 bill and a sticky note and say, hey, do me a favor, we're running late for your interview. Can you just go to the corner shop, get us a latte and a long black, and then come back? Whatever they look at you when you ask them that question will tell you really automatically whether or not they're probably people that are willing to serve. And when the person did it over like 20 interviews, it was unbelievable. It was so polarizing.
Just the accuracy with which it picked the right people.
Correct, because they were like people that naturally like to serve others, jumped up like, yeah, great, where's the cafe? Oh, it's on the corner. Okay, I'll be back in just a minute. Anyone that was like naturally not that way, it's not about them not being confident. They were just like, they had this look on their face like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, I'm here for an interview. I'm not here to get your coffee.
I'm not here to serve. I'm here to get a job where I serve.
Right.
In which case,
right,
maybe not the right job for you.
Correct. And so when you talk about First Two, my passion for our whole industry is how do you find those characters? Because that's the first step.
But I love these nuggets. I sort of come into these conversations with an expectation about what's going to excite me. And then I love it when I'm surprised by something. And people will tell you things that are fundamentally not true. They may not even know it's not true about themselves. And you have identified this DNA of service, this love of, oh, wow, I've just been given another opportunity to serve. That is a gift. That $10 note and that run to the coffee shop was a gift where I could serve someone. Fantastic. My day is better. In which case, you're the kind of human being we need in this business.
100%.
That is fascinating. Thank you for that. Talking of who and characters and dressing up, do you ever dress up as your superhero character? And why are superhero characters so important to Funlab?
I don't dress up usually as a superhero. You're referring to the comic books that we have, which they only come out. So if you work in our business for 20 years, we have a comic book that's written about you and your journey and your personality and who you are. And a superhero character is in, I think mine's Inferno. My name's Blaise, so that makes sense. And there's some very cheeky references in there about how bossy I am and all those things. Yeah, it's not something I dress up on, but maybe I should get an Inferno costume. You've inspired me.
So let's finish by talking a bit about the moment that you're now in. One of the things I'm really fascinated by, when you're first opening those Holey Moleys, you're finding old bars and nightclubs in sort of often sort of CBD or entertainment precincts and quickly populating that with a Holey Moley. It now feels like there's very much a shift to a precinct strategy where you're starting to build sort of Funlab hubs and destinations. And instead of worrying about is there lots of foot traffic there, going actually if we build enough of a hub and a precinct, we will bring the traffic to us. Is that a very conscious shift in strategy?
100%. I think the first thing is, there's huge amounts of economies of scale. You're talking shared back of house, kitchens, toilets, staff rooms, core rooms, the list goes on. They're very expensive elements to any build. And so from a landlord perspective, you become a lot more attractive. You might be getting 2 or 3 brands, 2 or 3 different reasons for guests to come. Some of our precincts drive anywhere from 350 to 500,000 people a year. And when you think about that and you're a landlord, be it a shopping centre or corporate business park or whatever that looks like, that's really attractive. And so definitely a conscious strategy moving forward. But to your point, you're creating a hub. You're creating a habitual hub of entertainment. And, that has got serious power. When you get that in the right location, with the right density, with the right mix of what we need for a business, it's a winning formula.
What do you anticipate bringing more of to those precincts over the next 5 years? And without wanting to give you too much of the leading question of the world's becoming ever more digital, more artificial, people are going to be seeking more physical, social, immersive experiences, all that stuff that we probably share entirely a belief around. But where do you then take that? What do you imagine is going to be, if you like, the future of fun and the future of play and the future of this immersive, competitive socializing? What's your sense of where these things are going to go next and what your precincts will look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think competitive socializing is going to get probably and you can see that the trend is crazy, particularly from 2018. I think the growth of them is going to be exponential because of the shift and change in this next generation of what they're doing. Fact is they are drinking less. GLP and weight loss and those things are definitely going to have an impact on just how much people want to eat and drink and consume. But what is not going to be removed is that want and desire to play and having a in real life way of socially connecting, particularly with AI and where all that's moving. I think the demand for our business and wanting to have different options is not going anywhere. So I genuinely believe probably the trend's going to become more aggressive. For us, it's about innovating our existing to stay relevant. It's going to be really important. But then, there's other categories that are emerging, things like game show. There's some really brilliant game show concepts in the UK now starting to enter into the USA. I think go-karting, but more electric kind of go-karts and the digitization of go-karts. What does that look like? Is that something we want to play in? We've obviously unearthed, challenge rooms, these quick play challenge rooms, we call them, probably because we've all got the attention span of a flea these days. But I think you're going to see a lot more of that want and desire to mix technology, leaderboards, and competitive play, but in real life. And how does that continue and where does that go? I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And even escape rooms, like how does that also change and evolve more from a technology standpoint? It's an exciting, I think we're in a very exciting, I mean, I've spoken to you, I'm so excited about where we sit, where our category sits, our industry and where it's going.
Well, look, I just think you're brilliantly placed. I mean, you are a business that is absolutely centered around physical, in real life experiences and immersion. You're led by a CEO who's got that founder type energy and that lived experience at the front line. And you're a business with Australian DNA. And I think fundamentally Australia, whether it's gin or fun, I think we do things really, really well. I think we execute to a level of quality and standards that are as high as anyone in the world, but I think we do it with a sense of joy and irreverence and sometimes silliness and a smile on our face. And I think that just means you are positioned in such a brilliant category.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't agree more. Look at some of the best companies in the world. They're Australian born. And the other thing is, if you can trade in Australia, this is a really tough country to trade in, from labour expenses to rent to, there's some big cost items, particularly in retail boxes. And so I think if you can do it here, you can pretty much do it anywhere.
From a Chapel Street bowling alley to the world's leading fun company.
Yeah.
Blaise, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Matt. Super fun. Appreciate it.
StoryWork was brought to you in partnership with Slingshot. As you've heard in today's episode, stories really matter, and there is no story more important than the one you tell your customers. But finding the right time, place, channel, and medium through which to tell that story is critical, and that's where my great friends at Slingshot come in. Slingshot pride themselves on developing creative media strategies to propel their clients further, faster. You can find out more about the brilliant work that Slingshot does, helping brands find their audiences, tell their stories, and achieve their objectives at slingshot.com.au. And talking about finding out more, you can find out more about this and every episode of StoryWork, including all the show notes and all of my key learnings from every conversation over on Substack.